What's happening, everybody? And thanks for tuning into the 264th episode of the Crash Bang Boom podcast. Today's guest is the one and only J.R. Connors of Cave-In. Cave-In's new record, Heavy Pendulum, is out everywhere on May 20th, and there's some incredible vinyl options out there for those of you interested. But in being fortunate enough to hear this record, I have to say, I think it's the best record they put out thus far, and I just can't wait for everyone to check this beast out. It is so damn good. But JR and I get into both the writing and recording of this incredible record, the impact Nate Newton has had since joining the band, an unfortunate break during the recording session, and a whole lot more. So I hope y'all dig it. Today's episode is sponsored by my man Carson Gant, aka OneUpLoops.com. Carson and his team spend a preposterous amount of time recording over 400,000 shaker, tambourine, and hi-hat loops at every possible tempo and multiple feels with incredible mics and outboard gear for you to pick and choose. It's organized for you to find exactly what you need with just a few clicks, and everything feels and sounds incredible. You can sign up for free just to check it out and gain full access to all 400,000 loops starting at just $5.99 a month. No download limits, whatever you want, whenever you want. New loops, one-shots, and drum breaks are being added weekly, so check it out, and that's OneUpLoops.com. Crash Bang Boom podcast can be found on all podcast platforms, so feel free to check it out and give me a like and or a subscription and or a positive review for the previous 260-plus episodes. The support is appreciated. If you want to check out more of the history of the band, check out episode 158 with JR as well. Heavy Pendulum, May 20th, Crash Bang Boom.
Crowds go mad with joy.
All right, I'm here with J.R. Connors of Cave-In. Got an incredible new record, Heavy Pendulum, out that I've been obsessively listening to. Congrats on that. J.R., what's happening, man?
Oh, not much, man. It's good to see you again, even though it's remote.
I know, man. I know. A different world the last time. In person, doing interviews at a venue before you played a show. What? What the hell was that world, right?
Yeah, totally different now.
I know, man. Well, last time, what I'm referencing is when Cave-In came through New York and y'all played the Bowery Ballroom, and y'all were just getting Nate in the mix, and I had not seen y'all yet. I'd seen video of those shows yet, so I had a sense of how awesome Nate was sounding with the band, and it was an awesome night to hear all those songs, hear Nate again in the mix. And, then next thing you know, shortly thereafter, I feel like it was pandemic times. Do you recall, like, when that tour happened? When did we speak?
Yeah, I mean, that would have been right at the end of, I want to say 2019, right?
Yeah.
So I think we were doing the East Coast run when we saw you, in the fall of 2019. And then from there, we went, finished up that run, went to the West Coast for 2 weeks. And then from there went to Japan, actually.
Wow.
And we were in Japan right when everything was starting to break in China.
Whoa.
And we were seeing on the news, like Japanese news channels, like we didn't understand what was being said, but like, the hazmat suits and them like smoking out the streets and stuff. And we're like, whoa, what's going on,
Wow.
And then the guy who was traveling with us, Tadashi, he filled us in on what was going on, and we were like, oh shit, like this is crazy. Should we even be here? And it was definitely pretty sketchy,
Wow, man.
And then we got home from that trip, and probably about a month later everything shut down.
Whoa, man. Well, what did you do with yourself over the course of the last couple of years, man? I know it was, for some people, it was downtime, and then it was a time to just not play your instrument and take a break and not think about it. Other people buckled down, built home studios, focused on it, I moved out to Utah since we spoke last, and I now have a drum room, so we got out here in late 2020, so Utah didn't really lock down that much, but in moving to a new town, I at least had a drum room and I could just go play drums every day and just, geek out and drive my wife insane, who was trying to work from home, hearing my drums blasting through the house.
Oh, tell me about it, man.
What did you do with yourself, man?
Right at the beginning of it all, we started doing the bedroom covers. Well, not we, but 2 Minutes to the Late Night, those guys started really cranking out the bedroom covers. Mm-hmm. And I did a couple of those. I definitely, for the first few months had my big drum set up in my bedroom right next to our bed. And
oh boy,
my wife was like, what are we, teenagers again, like. But she was gracious enough to let me let me hang out in the bedroom with my drum set. Actually, I only did 2 of the 2 Minute to Late Night videos, but I did those in my bedroom. And then, just recorded on my little mixer here and sent them off to those guys, and they mix it in with other artists doing the same thing,
Exactly.
So that was great because it kind of, it gave us something to do to keep busy. We had just gotten off of that tour, so we were still kind of lubed up and ready to play.
Yeah.
And we didn't really know what else to do, so we started sharing demos and stuff. And at the same time is when the 2 Minutes to Late Night stuff started. So we did that, and that kept us busy, and that was a great little program that those guys did because it kept everyone kind of sane and in good spirits anyways,
for sure.
And yeah, I mean, after that, continued to send demos back and forth, just like here and there. We did a couple covers just internally with Cave In.
Mm-hmm.
And we worked on a quick little project with this woman here on the East Coast, Ashley Rose, who works a lot with works in fashion. I don't know the right terms on that end of the spectrum, but she does some really cool stuff, and we helped her out with one of her shows, doing a little bit of a soundtrack there with that.
Nice.
So we were doing like little things here and there, to kind of keep busy and to keep the ball rolling, so to speak.
Yeah.
Probably about 3 or 4 months into the pandemic, Steve started sending around demos for what could potentially be the next Cave In record.
Mm-hmm.
So we started working on that stuff.
That's interesting that there was some remote writing process with y'all. I'm assuming Steve's still down in Brooklyn.
Yeah, he was. Yeah.
Because when I hear it, it has such a cohesive element to it. It sounds like a band in a room, all writing together, all vibing together. It has such a continuity to it, and that's such a classic. When I consider what a classic album is, it's the continuity from a vinyl perspective of being able to listen to it in its entirety, flipping the records over.
Yeah.
And the record absolutely has that. So that's interesting that even at the beginning or throughout the process, even that it was remote. I mean, did it stay remote for quite some time before y'all were even getting into a room together?
Not really. So probably for the beginning bits there, it was like Steve sent around a bunch of demos, and we had jammed, doing that and writing parts. But then it quickly became like, the conversation started that we should maybe focus on a record since no one else has anything to do. I mean, we were in a pretty unique spot because both Steve and Nate, are in busy bands, so. This is the first time that they had slowed down or had the opportunity to slow down.
Right.
So we definitely went that route that you had mentioned earlier, where we were like, okay, well, instead of just stopping and doing nothing and seeing what happens with how the world is going, why don't we just, we all trust each other enough to be safe in our own little bubbles,
Yeah.
And, so we started meeting at our rehearsal space in Charlestown, and it was nice to be able to do that and not have the pressure of a schedule or a time frame that we had to get something done by.
Absolutely.
So in a way it really helped with our creativity because we were just like, whatever, we got no worries about finishing anything.
Wow.
We'll just write until it's done. And at that point, that early in the stage, we weren't even considering getting into a studio or anything. We were just like, let's see if we can make this work,
Mm-hmm.
So we started writing in as a full, 4-piece in the rehearsal space at that point.
Right.
So it did transition from being, demos sent via email to, realizing that, we actually wanted to try and spend some time and focus on making the record.
Right.
So we got into the space to do that, and we were really cautious about it, but we still forged ahead.
Yeah. And how many songs is it? Like 12? I know that there's like interludes and stuff.
Yeah, in total, on the record is 14 songs.
Wow.
But there are a handful left over that didn't make it.
Crazy.
And only really because some of them weren't really finished by the time we decided that, we have a giant bulk of material that is record worthy.
Mm-hmm.
And then some of it also was just, I mean, the record's 70 minutes long, so we're just like, we gotta call it quits at some point, you know.
Yeah,
I mean, make it like a quadruple record, you know.
yeah.
So yeah, there's some stuff left over, but yeah, there's 14 tracks on that.
Crazy. Well, with Nate in the band, I mean, what do you feel he brought to that process of getting the record together? Because again, in listening to it from my perspective, I'd say it's possibly the most focused Cave In record that I've heard y'all put out.
Yeah.
And I just, again, love listening to it in its entirety. So I was just kind of curious as to what element he sort of brought in with his background and personality and everything.
Yeah, I mean, he certainly played a big role in writing for that record. It certainly helped that we had all worked together in various projects.
Mm-hmm.
So when we started writing together, it was very easy to, you know, get into the flow of things. And then also he kind of had a really cool perspective on being in the band and helping to write, because, you know, for as long as we've known him, since the 90s, I mean, he's been around Cave In, he's seen us, you know, through our ups and downs, and just playing shows with his bands and stuff like that. I mean, it was really, he came into the band as like from a good outside perspective, but as being a friend as well, as not just a fan, you know?
Yeah.
So, you know, and through the years, he's always said that he had ideas of like where Cave In could go and what we could do and stuff like that, you know, and we certainly encouraged it. We were like, dude, just step in and be as much a part of this writing process as you want to be.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, we really encouraged him to take part in it. And it was great that he did, because his perspective too on, you know, writing music, besides coming at Cave In from a fan standpoint and then being in the band and being able to give ideas and stuff like that, we all came from a similar background music wise, like our influences and what we grew up on.
Mm-hmm.
So it was really easy to connect that way. And there was a lot of, you know, referencing other bands like classic rock and hardcore and punk and all this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just like, we were firing just, you know, so seamlessly, because we had a common ground and all that stuff. You know? So yeah, he was great. And it was kind of, he took on pretty much the same role that Caleb played in the band, where, you know, Caleb was always very much, you know, kind of quality control of Cave In, you know, because you get the, you know, the three meatheads from, you know, Methuen, Mass, who grew up on grunge, you know, and Caleb was, you know, from New Hampshire. He had a different viewpoint on things, and he was very good at being like, guys, this isn't so great, or this is what we should focus on. You know, he was very much QC in the band.
Yeah.
You know, Nate stepped in and was just naturally, you know, that role was taken by him as well, you know?
Wow.
So it was cool, you know, I mean, you know, it was the same thing. I mean, we set out and we couldn't help it almost, but, you know, kind of write a grunge record. And, you know, Nate comes along and kind of starts doing the QC thing. And it's definitely what was needed.
Interesting.
So it was cool.
Yeah. I mean, I remember telling you at the time when we spoke last that if there was one guy on the face of the planet that I thought would do Caleb's presence justice, both in bass tone and vocally and everything else, it would have to be Nate. So it's amazing that he has worked so well in the absence of Caleb and done so much of that presence justice, in my opinion, sonically, attitude-wise, everything else. It's there, which is amazing, man.
Yeah.
That's not a common thing to be able to, in the absence of someone, to bring that spirit.
Yeah.
Nate totally has it.
Yeah, I mean, he totally gets it. I mean, I don't think the conversation went so far as to consider anyone else, really.
Yeah.
We had the benefit shows for Caleb's family, and Nate, you know, stepped up and was going to do those. And so, you know, in that process, it kind of just like, we realized that we worked really well together. And having him in the band, it's like, because he played in Old Man Gloom with Caleb.
Right.
And, you know, he has his own history with Caleb.
Exactly.
And they were great friends as well. So for someone to step into those shoes, it's almost like they have to know that person well. They have to understand that person and where they come from, and have written music with that person. I mean,
totally.
like all those boxes were checked with Nate, and I remember, when Old Man Gloom started, especially when Nate and Caleb joined the band. I mean, their dynamic was so great in that band, and they played so well off of each other. And I remember, thinking back then that it's like, man, it's like Caleb and Nate are, my two favorite vocalists, contemporary metal vocalists.
Right. Yeah.
So it's just, it made so much sense for him to be in the band, and we lucked out when we asked him, formally. I mean, we kind of knew he was going to say yes, but when we asked him, he said, yeah, of course. And that took a lot off of our shoulders, when he joined the band.
Absolutely. You had mentioned your kit earlier that you had set up. Was that the same white kit that I saw you on that tour with? Was that a big Ludwig kit that you were playing?
Yeah. So you saw that one. It was like a 78 Ludwig kit.
That makes sense. Yeah. The white ones, they did those late 70s, early 80s.
And that kit was massive.
What were the dimensions on that?
So the kick was just a 24, and it was actually shorter than my Yamaha set. It was, I think, a 16-inch in length instead of the 18 that I play with.
Right.
But so that was the kick, and it was like, they call it the Virgin kick. It didn't have any mounting hardware for the toms. And that's the only reason why I was hesitant on selling it, because I did end up selling it.
Oh, I didn't realize you sold it. Crazy. And you were playing a 14, 18?
Yeah, so the rack tom was actually a 15.
Oh, whoa.
And then I had two toms, but when you saw me, I only had the one floor. But it came with a 16 floor. No, it was an 18-inch floor and then the 20-inch floor.
Oh my God, dude.
It was kind of silly,
Yeah. Wow.
But it was weird. Like, I had to work really hard to make them project, I think, because of the size, and then on top of that, because they were made in the 70s, I mean, the quality control for, drum sets made back then wasn't the best.
Oh, I know. Yeah.
So it was kind of, the heads didn't see properly. And it was like, I was looking at spending a bunch of money to get them, kind of fixed in that end of things. And, the kick drum, because it was shorter, every time I would hit it, it would kind of flop back and forth. So I was like, I really like, and I just wanted to make that Ludwig set just my black Yamaha set.
Right.
And I was like, well, why am I going to bother with that? I'll use the set that I love, and it's like, that set has been in Caven since, the early 2000s. So it's kind of like, the guys give me shit, but I refer to it as the Caven drum set,
Right. The Ludwig one or the Yamaha one?
No, the Yamaha.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah.
What Yamaha kit is that? I don't believe I've seen you play it live.
So it's a I just love it because it's a black sparkle, but I call it a first gen. I don't know if Yamaha would call it that, but it's the first generation of the Oak Custom.
Oh, right on.
Yeah, beautiful sounding drum set.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, the only thing that I would want in a different drum set is some of the mounting, especially for the rack toms. It had this weird, I don't know what you would call it, but it had a floppy kind of arm on it.
Oh yeah.
Like I had two racks at one point when I first got that drum set, and the smaller, the 12-inch that I have, actually the shell cracked because of all the tension from the drum swinging on that mount that they had, because it only had 2 points of contact on the mount, and it would flop back and forth.
Crazy.
Which they fixed in the current lineup of the Oak drums, and I think there are other lines too. But now it's 3 points and it's fixed, and they figured their stuff out with that.
Right.
So that's the only thing that I would change on those drums, But otherwise, they're great.
Crazy. Well, one of the reasons why I asked ultimately leads me to this question, which is, I mean, y'all put your first record out in 98, I guess, and y'all worked with Kurt Ballou on that. Then flash forward, 22, 3, 4 years later, you're back with Kurt Ballou. So I guess tell me a little bit about where just that process of going in and recording and kind of where you were at. It sounds like you were keeping your chops up to some degree, doing all of the demoing and writing, and then all of the bedroom covers, as you called it. So I guess just tell me a little bit about what drum set you used. I was curious if you used one of your drum sets for that record.
I did, yeah.
You did? Awesome.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about just getting in there and tracking the drums, man, because I mean, for 14 songs, and I don't know if you recorded additional ones while you were there, but 14, 70 minutes of music, that's a lot, potentially a lot of tracking, I feel like.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I mean, the tracking itself was split up between two sessions because of reasons I'll get into in a minute.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I used the black Yamaha Oaks
Awesome.
in the studio. Those drums, I just fucking love them. So
it's the Cave-In drum set.
It's the Cave-In drum set. And those guys are laughing at me right now. But yeah, Kurt was, he was fine with letting me use those drums. I mean, he definitely worked his own magic as far as tuning them up and making sure they sounded great in his room.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he knows that spot,
of course.
So it was cool to work with him with the drums that I love, and I have a lot of pride that those drums made it onto the record.
Hell yeah.
So, and, Kurt had a big, obviously a big hand in the way they sound on that record.
Oh yeah.
It's interesting because when we did Until Your Heart Stops, obviously different drum set. I can't even remember which one I had.
Right.
Doing that, we had just had Caleb join the band, a little bit prior to that. So he was fresh in Cave-In when we went in to do Until Your Heart Stops.
Right.
And, we worked with Kurt doing that. And it was one of those experiences like we were doing because we were young and kind of inefficient in our playing. So, back then I couldn't play those songs front to back, so we would do like, track the verse and then track the chorus and then, glue that stuff together after the fact. And, fast forward, like you said, 20 something years later and, getting into the studio with Kurt again for the first time since that record.
Right.
We've all been there, various projects.
Yeah.
But as Cave-In as a unit, that was the first time since Until. And, going in there, it was kind of a similar situation where Nate had just joined Cave-In.
Right.
And, so that was an interesting kind of coming around full circle with Cave-In and Kurt.
Totally.
And then, so the reason why it was split up, so we did tracking for basically half of the record in the beginning of 2020. Man, I can't even, now it's like you're digging through the black hole of pandemic years, right?
Right.
I'll just say this, the year that we recorded the record, we did, the first batch of songs in the beginning of the year. And then I actually developed tendonitis in my snare hand.
Oh no.
So I had to stop and, take a break from playing. So it would heal. And at that time I was like, oh man, am I going to have surgery and stuff, like, losing my mind about this stuff. And then on top of that, having the pandemic play out, and it's like,
right.
Really heavy mentally speaking,
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So, we did the first batch of songs there at the beginning of the year and then took, basically that summer off. And then so I could heal. And then once I could start playing again, we, went into the rehearsal spot and really focused on the next batch of songs that we were going to do with Kurt. And then went in the fall time of that year.
Wow.
To finish up the record, so it was definitely involved and it was kind of drawn out, unintentionally.
Right. That's wild. I mean, the good thing is Kurt is such a master and knows that room so well, but it's interesting to think that you broke the kit down, remiked it. There's so many variables that could change the sound.
Totally.
But he did a great job of making everything sound consistent. I wouldn't have thought that was recorded in two different sessions with how much of a break in between potentially?
Like months, like 4 or 5 months. Yeah.
Damn, dude.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, that was a little bit of a concern, definitely, when it came time for mixing, especially. But his assistant, Zach, they work great as a team. And the first round of songs that we did, they took, meticulous notes on mics, what they used. They took a lot of pictures
right
on mic placement and stuff like that. And, down to like, I ordered the same type of heads when we went in the second time, except, and you can kind of notice this in the recordings. The only way that you can really tell the two sessions apart is the snare sounds slightly different.
Okay.
And it's the same snare, But the first round, it was a clear control sound head for the batter head.
Mm-hmm.
And then the second time around, I used coated head.
Okay.
And it sounds slightly different. And I mean, we can tell which ones are which, you know?
I got to listen for it now.
Yeah. Now you can kind of pick out. That's like a little Easter egg there. But
yeah,
with all the other stuff, I mean, we use the same cymbals, same drums. We put them in the same spot, all the same mics, you know, like
right.
Kurt has his stuff dialed in to the point where he can, replicate session to session, you know?
That's crazy.
So it's great.
Were you using a Black Beauty?
No, I have, so it would have been the snare that you saw at that New York show.
Okay.
So it was a reverse. So it's a 67 Ludwig Acrolite.
Oh, nice.
So that's what I used. Yeah. So I fell in love with it. Before that, I was using like an 80s Yamaha snare, which was also really cool. But I mean, I got that Ludwig snare around the same time that I got the Ludwig white kit, just so I could match, brands. And I mean, I fell in love with that snare. I mean, it sounds amazing. And it doesn't really, it's like one of those snares where it doesn't matter what you throw at it as far as heads and tuning. It just sounds great all the time, So that's what I use now. And unless I lose it or it gets stolen or something, like knock on wood, that's my snare now.
Yeah, I have 6 snare drums. I've sold probably a dozen at this point, and I have one that I got from a guy off Craigslist who had it it must have been just sitting in a case underneath his bed. It had never been touched. I'm assuming because of the head and the strainer that was on it, that it was an original, like, early 80s one.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the 5x14. I'm assuming you're playing the 6.5x14, right?
No, actually it's 5x14.
Is it really?
Yeah, it's a small guy.
That's crazy. I've had similar experiences with that snare where just dialing up the room mics, when you can hear it, the way that it cracks and the quick decay of it, it's like a magic snare. It's crazy.
Yeah, and they're super super sensitive with dynamics and stuff like that, you know?
Yeah.
And that's literally why I fell in love with it, because it's just, you could do anything on it and make it sound different, but that different is always good,
Right.
And it's a similar story. I got that drum. There's a guy here in Medford that sells stuff out of his backyard, and I went to go pick it up, and he literally had it in one of those like outdoors plastic, like 50-gallon barrel.
Really?
That you get at like Home Depot or something. And he had just a stack of snares in that thing outside on his porch,
Outside, no less.
Maybe I shouldn't have said where it is, but it's a secure location.
Right.
So I walk up and, figuring he'd pull it out of his shed or out of his house or something. And he's like, pops the lid off of this trash can. And he's got this great snare. I'm like, all right, I'll take it, And
wow.
It turns out to be, the best snare drum I've ever owned.
That's crazy, man. And you know what? I was in like marching band and school band and everything. That was the go-to snare that you would have when you were playing in like school band. You'd be over here. One guy'd have a triangle going fucking ding, 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 and then playing some silly rudiments on like this acrolite snare. And that was like the ubiquitous snare within schools. And then here it is years later, I'm playing it, like being blown away about how it sounds when it's mic'd.
Yeah, right. I mean, it's like one of those snares that, they're all over the place, but I think, people understand that they're great drums, but, this day and age with so much to choose from, it's like, maybe they get forgotten sometimes,
Totally. Yeah.
But I mean, and you can get them, for kind of cheap, like a couple $100 and you get an amazing snare, I mean, there's some things like same thing with the strainer. When I got it, I had to switch out to, updated the strainer hardware.
Yeah.
Because it had the strainers on it that use strings and stuff, and I was like, "This isn't going to last very long.
It won't last." I've changed all those out as well. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, you kind of update to modern hardware on the snare itself, but that's all you really need, and it's like an extra $85 on whatever you pay for the drum, and it's perfect after that.
Absolutely, man. And reverting back to when you mentioned taking the break and tracking for that first session, were you ailing? I mean, during tracking, was your hand fucking with you?
Yeah, for the second time around, it got really sore, and I was using a lot of ibuprofen.
Yeah.
But, I saw 3 different doctors, 2 different hand specialists, because I was so freaked out about this. especially because it was the first Cave-In record that we had done in a proper studio in like over a decade. I was like freaking the fuck out, you know?
Yeah.
Especially because I have a history of getting injured and not being able to play drums at Cave-In, you know?
Oh yeah, you told me about the time when you were skateboarding and fucked your hand
yeah,
up, right?
like, you know, at least this time it wasn't doing something stupid, you know?
Right.
Or something that I shouldn't have been doing.
Yeah.
But in talking to the doctors that I talked to, the woman that I saw at the end, she was great because she was telling me that, yeah, one guy wanted to just perform surgery right away on my tendons, you know?
Yeah.
And that freaked me out. And I was like, oh man, is this what it's going to have to be like now?
Second opinion time.
Forever worried about having problems.
Right.
So I went to the last doctor that I saw and had a second opinion. She was very holistic. And, you know, she's like, I don't want to perform any invasive kind of surgeries or anything like that if we don't have to. Mm-hmm. And she's like, you know, and I asked her, you know, can I play through this if I take pain meds and stuff like that and just kind of push through it? Is that going to harm me? And she's like, no, you're not going to, you know, ruin or rupture or tear a tendon just by overusing it. You know, worst that's going to happen is you're going to have kind of your strength fail and you won't be able to use it for a little bit. And I was like, all right, I can kind of deal with that. And I was like, wow. So it's cool if I take ibuprofen. I don't want to take any other kind of pain meds, you know, I don't want to go down that route, but you know, I'll double up on the ibuprofen and just kind of push through it. And she was okay with me doing that. So that's what I did. And it definitely, you know, hurt during the tracking of the last batch of songs, but you know, I was able to push through and took breaks when I needed to. And the guys were really understanding of that.
Yeah.
It worked out for the best, you know, and now it doesn't really bother me. And I just, you know, this is a PSA for those drummers getting a little older. It's like, you got to take your time and really spend double the amount of time you think you need to just warming up and really focusing on technique and, you know, how you're hitting things, because that's, you know, it's a lot of shock going through your limbs.
Yeah. Your story is actually kind of eerily similar to something that happened to me many moons ago. I got in this crazy barroom brawl with like a bunch of rednecks. It was fucking wild, and I broke my hand. And when it was in the cast, it mishealed. You know, you've got the extension below your knuckles that I think it's the metacarpals or the extension of that. And then they kind of sit over a floating bone. All three of them just fused to that. So my hand doesn't bend, and I had to like really relearn how to use it, especially with drumming. That's so much fine motor skills. Totally. But I went to a doctor and he was like, I can break your hand and we can try to fix this, and it could very well be much worse than it is now. Right. Or you can just get back to drumming, and hopefully with time, your hand will start to just sort of compensate for that.
Yeah.
And thankfully, that was what he said, and it did take me a long time to get there. I didn't know if my right hand was ever going to be right again after that, but thankfully it is. I don't think about it much anymore unless it gets super cold and I'm like, my hand feels a little stiff, you know?
Yeah, you can definitely feel the weather.
Yeah.
I mean, that's actually almost exactly what happened to my right wrist years and years ago.
That was the skateboarding accident.
And I think I described it then, but essentially the same thing. Like, they did have to re-break the bone that was broken. They healed incorrectly and had to have a pin put in it. And I was like, oh my God. And, you know, with that sort of thing, you do have to, again, focus on your technique and really kind of relearn how to properly play drums, you know?
Yeah.
And I remember after that initial injury, I had to, you know, change the way my drums were set up and how high things were, and really focus on relearning how to play, you know, in a better way. But, you know, ultimately, if you can push yourself through that and know that there's light at the end of the tunnel, so to speak, you actually come out of that process in a better way and being able to play better and more efficiently and that sort of thing, you know?
Yeah.
So after everything's all said and done, I'm glad that it happened to me, but while it was happening, it fucking sucked. You know?
Sucked. You know, it's crazy, man. You mentioned earlier when y'all did it Until Your Heart Stops with Kurt so many years ago, and kind of where you were at musically. But I mean, think about where he's at now as well, as the Grammy Award winning, you know, producer, engineer from High on Fire, et cetera, and some of the albums that he's been cranking out since then. I mean, did you not notice as well sort of how he had sort of ascended in his craft and working with him?
Oh, definitely. I mean, through the years, always have listen to what he's been recording or what he's had a hand in, you know?
Oh yeah.
And it's just undeniable, you know? Yeah. I mean, all the Converge stuff, like the High on Fire stuff. I mean, you know, the list goes on and on. Even like I would consider experimental things from Kurt. I mean, he recorded that Japanese band Endon, and that doesn't sound anything like, you know, I guess what you would consider as a typical recording from Kurt, but it still sounds really cool and really unique.
Interesting.
And he was actually able to capture that band's gnarly style in a very appropriate way for what they were trying to do.
Right.
You know, from an outsider's perspective, of course.
Yeah.
He has everything that he does in that studio so dialed in that he can take departures, and just like the snare, I mean, it just sounds great no matter what he does to it, you know?
Totally.
I think a lot of it has to do, you know, of course, with the band and, you know, the level of musicianship that, you know, whoever he has in there takes to the table. But yeah, as far as his skill and what he's able to pull off in that studio, I mean, it's gotten way better over the years, and it just, you know, it's the sort of thing, like we keep saying that it's we have a great community of very creative individuals in this area, you know, in all the bands that we have kind of overlapping and you know, sharing members. And it's just like, it's nice to be a part of a community that all the individual members keep leveling up on their own.
Yeah.
And then you combine forces like fucking Voltron, and it's just this, you know, outer world type thing, you know?
Totally.
So yeah, I mean, the things that he does have definitely improved over the years as well, you know.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm psyched that y'all got to work with him on it. I've mentioned it previously, but if I look at the sort of modern vinyl that I have, especially within heavy music, he is the producer engineer by far that I have the most vinyl from.
Right.
Which speaks kind of volumes as to how much I enjoy both the bands that he works with and ultimately his production of them, you know. So that was awesome. I think that y'all met. You know, we've talked as well about Andrew Schneider, who y'all worked with previously, somebody that I interviewed, and I got to talk to him about working with y'all, which is cool because I kind of got your perspective of it, and then talked to him about his perspective of working with y'all, especially at the timing with y'all coming off of a major label and sort of getting back to doing what y'all do. And Perfect Pitch Black is such a great record that I still listen to, and now I've got these two records from Kurt and then Andrew that are my favorites from y'all.
Right.
But with the title track, Heavy Pendulum, which I love that song, by the way. I keep listening to that one, and then it'll go into the next one. I'm like, oh fuck, I love this one too. Yeah. Did the song title precede what was ultimately the album was entitled?
Yeah, I mean the song was written, and that was the name of the demo.
Gotcha.
That we were working on at the time, and when it came time to think about titles of the record itself, I definitely mentioned like Heavy Pendulum is a cool, you know, cool title.
Absolutely.
And those guys agreed. So, I mean, you know, the reason why I thought that was such a cool title for the record was because, you know, especially during the time that we wrote that stuff, it was very much, you know, if you can think of the, you know, swinging of a pendulum, it's like on one side you have really heavy and negative emotions with whatever was going on in the world at that time. Like, I mean, all the protests and stuff happening in the States, and, you know, just all the bullshit that was going down worldwide.
Absolutely.
While we were writing, that was all on one side of the pendulum. And on the other side, I mean, you had things like, you know, really extreme, positive, joyful moments. Like, you know, I mean, I have mentioned it before, but you're stuck in a house with, you know, my wife and kids, and, you know, I love them dearly no matter what, but, you know, it's a different thing when you're surrounded by them constantly.
Oh yeah.
You know, with people not being able to go to school or work or, you know, stuff like that. And it really, luckily for us, and I know this isn't the case for a lot of people out there, but for us, it was a positive thing. And we kind of became like a tighter unit than we already were, you know? And so you had that joyful thing. And then the other joy was, you know, being able to sit in a room with my close friends that I've known for decades and just be creative and really, you know, try and make something of what we were doing musically, you know? So, you know, just having that pendulum swing back and forth daily, moment to moment. I mean, you'd be in this practice space writing these sick, songs, and then you go home and look at the news and just get fucking devastated.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
So it just made the most sense to capture the mood and the vibe of, you know, the time that we were writing that record in. And then not to mention, you know, the whole thing with Caleb and kind of the band picking back up. I mean, that's both negative and positive on both extremes.
Totally.
And it's like, it's just nonstop swinging back and forth. And it's brutal, but in the same way, it teaches you a lot of about how to go through life and how to deal with life. You know? And that's at least our story. I mean, you know, I know a lot of people had a really hard time, and my heart goes out to those people, you know. But for our experience, that's the kind of the background on the title of the record.
Right. Well, I think that part of the focus and the cohesiveness of the record that I was kind of picking up on, it sounds like I assumed that part of that was the sort of shared experience of Caleb's passing, but it sounds like it was also equally kind of put you all on the same plane with the pandemic, that was the outlet for y'all as well, in addition to all of the shared influences and everything. So all of those things kind of came together on this, and I think that was something I was trying to put my finger on it as to what in the process would have led to that, you know, but I think you just sort of alluded to all of those forces combining to ultimately create this fucking awesome record.
Yeah. Thank you.
That's awesome, man. When you were talking about some of your influences that y'all were throwing around the room, did y'all revisit any grunge records or sit around and listen to any records in particular? Or was it more or less y'all got together and be like, you know, kind of like this, and the natural thing that happens within bands writing music, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was a little of both of that. I mean, I can only really speak for myself personally. You know, those guys might have revisited older stuff or old favorites, or, you know, even some new favorites. I mean, there's some newer influences in there as well. But I mean, especially for me, I mean, I did the sort of Phil Collins trick where with every song, you kind of imagine who of your favorite drummer how they would play the song.
Sure.
You know, if I thought of the song Floating Skulls, for instance.
Yeah, it's a killer one.
That song, for me personally, is the mashup between, you know, Frank Beard of ZZ Top and Dave Maddox of Fairport Convention, you know, mixing those two.
Interesting.
And, you know, it was like, that's what popped up into my head as a reference while we were writing. And I just I was like, I'll do my best impersonations of these people, you know?
Sure.
And as far as arranging the songs and stuff like that, I mean, that's what I had in mind as well. I mean, you know, we kept referencing, you know, spoken references out loud that, you know, we would go back to classic rock, like Fleetwood Mac and Zeppelin and all the, you know, the standards. And then we would mention, you know, Soundgarden is an obvious reference for the record. You know? Soundgarden, Alice in Chains. I mean, you know, all this stuff. And then you would go into, you know, modern, I mean, the list goes on and on, but I think the point is that with each song, you know, if there was a reference point or multiple, we would try and get as much as that into the song as possible.
Yeah.
And, you know, do that with every song. And then at the end of it, you have, you know, what you have, I guess.
Right.
But my MO is not to listen to music while I'm writing music.
Yeah.
Mainly because my ears get tired and my brain gets kind of tired, you know, switching back and forth between listening and writing,
right,
and being creative and just kind of soaking up, you know, music. So it's like when I'm not writing, that's when I kind of revisit things or listen to new things. But, you know, of course, there were a couple of records that we would listen to that I think we couldn't help but have them influence the way we were doing things.
Absolutely.
But certainly in kind of an indirect way, you know?
Yeah. No, I hear you, man. When you mentioned Soundgarden and Alice in Chains, I was just thinking about it, interestingly enough, because I went down to my dad's house and I saw my laminated tickets from Lollapalooza's 92 and 93. So 92, I saw Soundgarden, and then 93, Alice in Chains. I can't remember if it was, interestingly enough, Primus that headlined or if it was Alice in Chains. They were the last two on the 93 bill. But Alice in Chains didn't have the greatest show because Lane had broken his foot in likely a drunken New Orleans accident. Fucking, you know, rolls into New Orleans, and then they're just, you know, so they didn't have the best show, and it's the only time that I've ever seen them. And but it's one of those bands that I still go back and listen to. Specifically, I've gone back to Facelift a good bit which just takes me back to like 90 when it came out and I had it on cassette listening to it,
Right.
you know, the opening song, so many songs on that. But Soundgarden was fucking absolutely killing when I saw them in 92, man. Matt Cameron, what can I say? He's
a beast, man.
He's just one of the best I've ever heard, man, you know?
Yeah, totally. And, I mean, so I guess in those songs, I mean, for our record, in my head, I would reference him a lot, especially on Super Unknown.
That's the one.
I mean, I know like everyone's standard favorite would be, Bad Motorfinger or something
Super
like that.
Unknown it's for me.
I mean, Super Unknown, I listened to nonstop for not months, but years,
yeah.
And it was like that record and, Alice in Chains, Dirt. And then, on top of that, Siamese Dream from the Pumpkins was, that's always been when I have those moods that I need to go back and listen to some of the stuff around that time period. That's one of the first records to go on,
Hell yeah.
And just I tried to get all that shit.
I hear you. Matt Cameron and Jimmy Chamberlain, definitely strong influences for sure, man. Those guys.
Totally.
When I think about early 90s stuff, those two are absolutely two of the guys. Those influences, they'll never be leaving me.
Yeah, I mean, they're still inspiring.
Absolutely.
You listen to it years and years and years later, and it's like, oh, I can still pick up new ideas from this
Absolutely.
shit,
Yeah, man. One other record I know, because you said that y'all's is this new one is at 70 minutes, which is wild. I don't know if you got into Mastodon's Hushed and Grim record, but that is that thing is approaching like 90 minutes, like an hour and a half.
Yeah, right.
Which is insane. But a big, epic, dark kind of record that also. And it was released right at the tail end of 2021, as I remember. But I kind of have had a similar obsessive listening spree with your record as I did with that one when it came out. Both of which, if you're going to take a long drive between those two records, you got it 2.5 hours.
Yeah, from Salt Lake to Atlanta, right?
Yeah, it's crazy, man.
Yeah, I think it's kind of like almost like a lost art to make an album.
Yes.
And not just a record, but an album,
Absolutely.
like a listening experience, you know? And it's amazing that some people can still do that.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's hard to pull off these days. You could have said this 10 years ago where people are losing their attention span, but I think it's even getting worse,
Oh, absolutely.
With that same idea of like trying to get in as much of our, musical upbringing in, it's like, we grew up on albums like that, like Dark Side of the Moon and stuff, where you just listen front to back in a dark room with just headphones on, no other stimulation,
right.
And I don't have anything wrong or anything against like singles or, releasing a couple songs here and there or whatever. Someone's got a favorite song, that's what they listen to. But spending the time with something and really getting to hear how the band wants to play with dynamics, not just within a song, but within a full length record, if done right, it's pretty cool,
Absolutely.
And you have lots of ups and downs. So, I think a lot of people listen to like 3 or 4 songs from this band and then some other stuff from this band. And it's like, they play with dynamics in that way with switching between bands that they like. Whereas if, you get a band that understands the format, it's like you can play with the dynamics and give the listener a little bit of a break or a little bit of downtime for their ears to kind of regroup for the next part, coming up. And it's fun to play with dynamics in an album setting.
Absolutely. Well, yeah, I think y'all absolutely did it. So again, congrats on that, man. I'm going to be listening to this one for a long time to come, man. It'll be like it'll be like me revisiting the '90s stuff with Soundgarden. 30 years from now, I'll be tripping out on this album that y'all put out. With any shows that y'all come up, I know that y'all haven't announced too much, but everybody's schedule is looking like it's aligning to where y'all can play some shows, and I'm super interested to hear these songs mixed in with the back catalog and just hear a set of all this stuff now,
Yeah, I mean, we keep threatening to do just, the record front to back at every show, but
dude, I would be into it.
We would be too, but I think, we personally, and we've talked about doing just that, but I think we've come to the conclusion that with us personally, when we go see bands that we like seeing the stuff that we grew up on or the stuff that we love, So we don't want to be those bands that, shows up and we just play a bunch of new stuff and you're like, what happened to like this part of your career and stuff like that, So there will be a mix, but yeah, we're excited for people to hear it, man. I mean, we've been sitting on it for months now, you know? So it's finally like, being able to let the excitement out of the jar,
Right. What the release date is in May. Is it May 20th?
On May 20th, yeah.
Right on.
And then, yeah, we do have some short runs, some tours in the planning stages, just about to be announced, hopefully soon. Yeah. And then, besides that, we have got a couple more videos that we're ready to unleash on everybody. And then the record drops and we'll see what happens.
Hell yeah, man. I'm excited for people to hear it. And I'm super fortunate, I feel like, to get a little early glimpse of it and delve into it, man. It's been really fun fucking rocking it on all the different stereo systems in the house. And we got like we have 3 vehicles, all with pretty good stereo systems. So I've listened to it on like 5 or 6 systems by now. It sounds great on all of them. So hell yeah, man.
Well, that's encouraging.
Exactly. Well, dude, it was great talking to you. Best of luck on the record. I think people are absolutely going to love it. And yeah, man, hopefully I can catch y'all live. And I will certainly be wherever I can to try to catch it, man. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, let us know. We'll hang out again.
Hell yeah, man.
It was nice having another chat, man.
I know. Yeah, absolutely, man. All right, everyone. Thanks for tuning in, and thanks to JR for rapping. Always great to catch up with him, and what an incredible record in Heavy Pendulum. Heavy indeed. We'll catch y'all on the next one. Crash, bang, boom.